Okay, are you on YouTube?
Yes, and something is happening.
Yes. Can you hear audio? Am I live? Are we live?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Welcome. Sorry this is late and laggy, but hopefully it will still be useful. So, my name's Peter. I study PPE, Philosophy, Politics and Economics at the University of Oxford. And what about you? What do you do?
Talking to me now, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Sophia. I study Human, Social and Political Sciences at Cambridge.
Okay, cool. So we're basically going to walk through the UCAS application form, and as we do it, but also afterwards, take any questions, because it can be a little confusing, and it's nice to just see how you go through it. So did you already create a test account here?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Okay. Well, since I'm recording my screen, maybe it's better that I just create a test account as well. I don't know. Am I on? Can you see UCAS apply?
Yes, we're seeing your applying to UCAS now.
Okay. Cool.
Perfect.
I don't want to click on the YouTube video because I'm doing a screen capture, which means I'll get an infinite feedback loop if I do. That means I have no idea what's going on. So can you tell me if strange stuff?
Yes, I will tell you if something looks strange.
Cool. Okay, so this is UCAS Apply, which you have to use to apply to basically every university in the UK. And
you can actually maybe just log into my account here.
Oh yeah, cool. So if you tell me what's the username?
Yes. So my username should be 150-515-7169.
Cool. And if you Slack message me your password, I'll get it on my phone.
Yes, absolutely.
Or Facebook or whatever. Okay, cool. So yeah, you become a number at this point in UCAS, which is fun. It's a good idea to write down your username and password, because you'll probably be logging into this over a period of several months, and it's super easy to forget your password. Okay. Really secure password. Ooh. But we're not logging in correctly, so maybe I got something wrong.
Wait, here, I'll send you that. It's supposed to have some lines in between, like this.
Oh,
if you check store.
Maybe that's what's going wrong. I don't remember having to enter the hyphens, but maybe they've changed something. Okay. Nope. Sorry, guys. Did you... Okay, I'll just go to register myself because this isn't for some reason.
Oh, wait. Do it like this, then.
Unless... Because... Oh! Maybe it's to do with... which page...
Sorry, guys. We should be logging in right now.
But we might have made a mistake with the test password. This is going well. Okay, I'm just going to register. I don't know what's gone wrong, but I guess this is useful because everyone has to register anyway. So basically, you'll get a buzzword if you're applying through your school or college, and that basically connects you to your school and college, or school or college. It means you can have your teachers write a reference for you directly, and you don't have to worry about that. You can also apply independently, though. So we have some exciting terms and conditions, which I'm going to carefully scrutinize. And then Mr. Example Face is going to be born. Born on the 1st of January 2000. Okay, cool. So we can do UK or non-UK. Let's start by doing UK. I think. and we can always create another account later. So I think we're going to set the address to Project Access HQ. So let me just grab their address.
You can just write any address here, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
It didn't ask me for any further details.
Okay, so that's fine.
So you can just write Project Access or test even. It's going to be fine.
So postcode, okay, cool. Let's see if this works. Oh, no, incorrect format. Really, test isn't a postcode? Who knew?
You know, as an international student, they didn't require this much information.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to make example face an international student then. Woohoo. Test from... Oh, there's not another option.
Oh, I can see that Victor is asking a question. Let me answer that while we are creating the account.
Okay.
As Sophia answered, you can only apply to Cambridge or Oxford, which are the two universities that traditionally do interviews. There are some other universities that say that they sometimes do interviews. For example, some other universities do it for medicine, but usually no other universities do it. And because Cambridge and Oxford do it at exactly this time, it's very unlikely to clash. And since you can only apply to one of them, I don't think this will be an issue. Does that answer your question? If anyone else has any questions you wish to ask, feel free to write them in the chat now, and I'll answer them as good as I can.
Okay, so we're creating an account for example face, and since you're from Sweden, I've decided that example face is gonna be have the country Sweden. So
Great.
Yeah. So we have to set some security questions. Also has a pet called example. I'm
hoping that everyone have done this phase at this stage so that you're not creating the account today, but if you are, good that we're walking through it.
Yeah, of course, his favorite fictional character is himself, and I now have a username. Excellent. It says to please take a note of it because it won't be displayed at a later stage, so yeah, take a note of it, write it down, and I'll just do that now.
Okay, I don't know if you know this, Peter. I have a guess, but I am not quite sure. Someone is asking here, hi, I want to ask if I need to apply through UCAS as an international student applying for a master at Imperial College Business School. The master's application process looks a little bit different, at least at Cambridge, and you don't, as I understand it, regularly apply through UCAS. Do you know what the process is for Imperial, Peter?
I don't know the specific process for Imperial. I know that sometimes you do or can apply through UCAS. I'm not sure if you have to, so probably the best thing to do is to search Imperial International Master's Application, because there they'll have information that's specific. I'm sorry, I don't actually know, but yeah.
One thing I would recommend for anyone who wonders anything that they don't understand about applications to specific universities would be to write to their admissions officer. In their web pages, there's always a email address that goes to the admissions officers. There's usually one for undergrads and one for postgrads, but if you just email one of them, they will point you in the direction of the person who can help you. And they can answer these questions.
Cool.
Okay, this one I can help you with. When you know to reference in UCAS, will UCAS then contact that reference to get their statement, or do you need to do anything else yourself? The way it works is that when you enter the information of your reference, an email gets sent to them, and then they can then log in to UCAS themselves, where they post the reference. And unless you contact them and ask for it, you will actually never see what they wrote, because they will upload it themselves, and that is the end of that. So you don't need to do anything else as long as you have provided the correct information and email address to your reference.
Yeah, an interesting thing, by the way, is that you do have a legal right to see it if you want to see it. You don't have to though, and it's but you can request it if you really want to see it. On the left of the YouTube video, can you now see a "How are you applying?" question? Is that
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So I think we're going to go as an individual because I don't have a buzzword for this school in Sweden that example face doesn't go to. So you can go, you obviously choose whichever of these is relevant for you. Next, yes. Our character lives outside the United Kingdom. And this is telling you important information about early deadlines. So if you're applying for Oxford or Cambridge for any course at all, or also for medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine, veterinary science, you need to, at any university, you need to have your application finished by 6 o'clock on Tuesday the 15th of October, and that's 6 o'clock UK time. It's a good idea to have done it a day or so earlier so you're not scrambling around at the final moment, but that's the official deadline. You've got a bit longer until the 15th of January for basically any other application. And technically you can apply later, but applications are competitive, so applying later will usually not be a very smart idea in terms of maximizing your chances of getting.
I, for example, got all my offers before the January 15 deadline.
So did I.
Not only my Oxbridge offer, but all my other offers too. So I think it's strategic to apply by the 15th of October if you can.
Yeah, I think, so if you're not applying for Oxbridge, there's not really any evidence that that it means you're more likely to get other offers, but it's still nice to have done earlier, because then you can think about your A-levels and stuff. And yeah, so it's a nice idea, you're on this webinar. Okay, cool. Welcome example. We've done this. How exciting. So, I need to verify my fake email address, my example email address, but hopefully I can fill out the rest of this form first, because I think I only need to verify it to actually submit the application, which I don't want to do.
Maybe before you start doing that, we could answer Victor's question. If I request a copy of my reference, will my reference know that this happened? Do you know about this?
I'm not 100% sure. Let me think. So basically, the way you would, there are two ways you could request a copy of your reference. One is ask your referee, just ask them to give it to you, which obviously they'd know. You can also send what's called a subject access request, which you have to pay money for it, but it basically operates under the principle that this is personal data about you, and under EU law you have a right to access that personal data. If you do that, I don't think that the referee finds out, but I'm not sure, so it's something to check. But it's easiest to just ask them, because for one, you don't have to pay, usually. Okay, so this part of the process is quite long and boring, but it's important to get it right and just go through it carefully. I'm going to go through it slightly faster here because obviously we're not actually submitting this application. But here we go. So we have, do you see a load of boxes now for personal details? Is that showing up? Because I know this is very laggy. Hello?
Yeah, we can see you.
You can see. Can you see the personal?
Yeah, we see Mr. Mail example Mac example face. We're seeing it all now.
Okay, great. So they'll ask you questions like your permanent home, email address, date of birth, country of birth, nationality. Can I say exemplar? Do I have to choose? Let's see what happens. I don't advise that you fake a nationality or claim that you belong to a different nation. I think it will probably just make things more confusing, but yeah.
We have another question, the one regarding the employment. We will get to that section very soon, so let me address that when we're in that section to avoid confusion for this section.
Okay, cool. So residential categories, you have to choose between these different categories. So here we have, we said Sweden, so I'm going to say that example face is an EU national, but not a UK citizen. And these are reference numbers for language tests to check your English ability, but we don't have these, so we'll leave that blank. Then you can fill out your passport number and stuff, but that's not obligatory, as far as I can see. Then we have this, which is these. So you choose one of these, and in the case of being in Europe, it's 2, right? So here we go. Then there are questions about if you've lived in the EU or EEA, or Switzerland. So you then have preferences on what UCAS can tell you about. So you can get UCAS emails that are like promotional, extra things, but you can basically choose what you receive. You'll get like essential emails, things like if you get an offer, or like that sort of thing, whatever. But these are like extra things. And you can also fill out if you have a disability or special needs, so that universities can take that into account.
If you have any questions on these things as we are walking through them, just ask them and we'll address them straight away. If there's anything related to what Peter is going is entirely clear.
Yeah, cool. Ask away. So now you click section completed on disabilities when you're done with that, and save. But I apparently haven't filled out some stuff that I need to fill out. So
I think you can still click another section in the left.
Yeah, that's true. So you
on the left side, you don't have to fill it all in.
So I can go into choices, and we could fill out that later, hypothetically. So now you get to choose which universities you want to apply to. A few things to bear in mind: you can apply to a maximum of 5, but you don't have to apply to 5. You can apply to just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. You can only apply for undergrad for one of Oxford or Cambridge, with an exception if you're applying for an organ scholarship, but that's a different thing that probably doesn't apply to most of you. And you can add choices later, so you can apply to, say, Oxford early, and then add more university choices after you've submitted that part of the application. So if you're really not sure, say you want to go to an open day, but the open day is after October the 15th, don't worry about that. So the way this works is that you find institutions, find universities, and you get codes, which you can then use to apply for a specific course. So you can go onto the UCAS search tool, and you can search for a course. So say philosophy, politics, and economics, which is a great course, by the way. So hopefully this will work. And go.
Does the payment for applying vary depending on how many universities you apply to?
Yeah.
The way I remember it, it is slightly cheaper if you apply to just 1, but if you apply to 2 or 5, it's the same fee.
Yeah, that's how it was for us, and I don't think it's changed. So
it doesn't vary a lot. I think it's £12, £13 if you apply for 5, and about half if you apply for 1.
Yeah. So UCAS has this search tool. So if you want to just explore courses, another way to find your course code, if you already know, to say I want to apply to PPE at Oxford, is to Google the course, and click on like the page about the course, and you'll see a UCAS code. So should be able to just take that code and copy that in, and we need an Oxford UCAS code as well, I think. Let's see. Oxford University UCAS code. So University of Oxford 033. This should work. You can also, oh, I'd forgotten this. There's an easier way. You can just type in the university there. That's how I did it. I should have probably revisited that. So another way to do it is just to go through this list. So like I don't know, philosophy and French. I select that. And then you can select a campus, or in the case of Oxbridge or say Durham, this is usually a college. So this is a list of colleges. So let's say St. Catherine's, and a start date, because you can apply in advance. You can do a deferred application, which means you say you want to take a gap year or do something for a year, that's available. But let's say we don't. We just select October 2020, and then you can select whether or not you're going to live at home while studying. I think that would be quite difficult at Oxford if your home is Sweden, so I'm going to select no. Okay, cool.
At least in Cambridge, case if you live more than, I think it is 3 kilometers from Cambridge, you cannot live at home. But if you live close enough to where your faculty is, you are allowed to live at home while you're doing your degree.
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar at Oxford. I don't know if it's 3 kilometers or what, but whatever. It's a similar principle. Other universities might be a bit more flexible. So here we have the education thing, where you basically add your school. Let's see if we can find a school. Now, I don't know the name of any school in Sweden, so I'm just gonna.
Do you want to? No, you can just use any school.
Yeah, I mean, I can just do any school, so I'm gonna type some letters and see what comes up.
I would like to add something when we're talking about this. When I applied, applying from a school in Sweden that only exists in one location, my school was not in the list, and I was first a bit stressed out about this. Don't be. It only means that your school didn't register itself on this platform, which is not an issue. But what you do then is that you type other. You can type the name of your school. You can still enter all the information about the courses you're taking and the grades you have, as with any other school. So don't worry if your school is not listed there. This might happen a lot for international students, and it's not an issue.
Yeah, good point. That's good advice. So attendance, full time. Okay, cool. So, oh right, I entered that I'll finish in the future. Okay, cool. So, now you can add qualifications. Firstly, you have to say your highest level of qualification you expect to have. So this is going to be below honours degree, because it's below a university degree. And then you add qualifications. So there's a list of popular qualifications, but you can also select. You can also use the search tool to find more unusual ones, other international ones. So we have things like A-levels and Scottish exams and Welsh exams here, but you can search, for example, international baccalaureate or something like that.
Again, here for me, my Swedish preparatory higher education diploma was not in this list, so I had to choose what was called other international qualifications. And when you choose that, you just enter the name of your qualifications, and it works exactly the same way.
Okay, cool. So we're going to go into.
And Catherine, we will answer. We've had the question about employment too. I'll answer that in just a second when we get to the employment section.
Yeah, cool. So you now into So I'm just choosing A-level, but you choose whatever qualifications you're doing and you've done. So I'm just going to choose some like subjects, and so it would be like.
When you enter things into this section, and this might be extra important for you who apply with like different type of qualifications, be as specific as you can. Like sometimes people think that if you apply in your own country, it might only be the grades from your last year that counts or something like that. When you enter things into UCAS, enter everything.
Yeah.
Like all the courses you have taken from when you started the stage of education you are now in, it's going in here. I think I had to enter like 23 or something separate like courses from my high school education, and that is what you should do, like everything. And also the ones where you do not yet have your grades, then you will just select pending instead of like knowing what grade you have already. And when you get your grades, you will tell the school.
Yeah, and your school, if you're applying through a school or college, they can add predictions for grades as well. So you can enter like specific module marks for A-levels, for the like old modular A-levels and all this, or like units, but you don't have to. So I'm not going to do that for now. So a tip is to use the save and add similar button, so that you add something like related. So say I'm going to add biology, A*, AQA, and add like so here you have to add a practical grade as well, because it's a science. That's how the A-level system works for sciences in the UK. And let's say chemistry. So you have to add A-levels. So this is pending. This is if you, let's say I'm taking it this year. And then you just go save once you've done that part. But that's not everything, because you want to also add like every other qualification you did, like Sophia said. So here we've got GCSEs in the UK, and you would go through and literally add every GCSE you took. It's not allowed to like skip out GCSEs where you didn't do as well as you wanted or things like that. Just everything has to go in.
Everything has to go in, yeah.
So,
it can actually cause an issue with your application later if you don't add everything. For example, when I applied, I had taken one semester at university in Sweden already, and I was very scared that that was going to reflect negatively on my application, but not entering it into UCAS was not an option, because then I would actually be lying in my application. So whatever it is that you have that needs to go in there, make sure it's there, and then they will assess it, and like hopefully it's not going to affect your application. But what might affect your application is if you actually lie in your UCAS application and withhold some information.
Yeah, don't do fraud. It's not good. So obviously,
Victor, to answer your question, no, a university does not know which other universities you're applying to and how many universities you're applying to. They can just see that you've applied to them, but they do not know who else you've applied to.
Yeah, there are only like 2 exceptions to that, which are they can guess. So they probably know that if you applied for a course that wasn't medicine or dentistry or veterinary medicine before October the 15th, chances are you were also applying to Oxford or Cambridge. And like, I guess someone could say it explicitly. If you said it in your personal statement, for example, then they would know. But I mean,
yeah, don't say it explicitly in your personal statement if you're applying to more than one school.
Yeah, that's probably not a very smart idea. So I can't be bothered to add like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 11 GCSEs, so I've just added 2 as an example, but I think you get the idea.
Okay, should we move on to the employment section?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's speed up.
Let me answer the questions that have come up now then from Anne-Catherine, and there was one more.
Cool.
So yeah, you asked if it's necessary or useful to provide information concerning employment, and if it helps your application in any way. And yeah, then the other question was if we stated any employment when we applied. So whether it is useful or not is up to you. Like, you're not obligated to state like every employment you have had. You can enter up to 5 different employments here. What they're recommending from UCAS is that you should not enter like what you've done as a volunteer. That you can enter into your personal statement if you want. So this should be like paid employment. If you've done something alongside your studies where you've like obtained good grades and you've also had another job, maybe that shows some sort of quality. If you worked with something related to what you're applying to, then I think it definitely makes sense to do it. In my case, when I applied, I had actually taken a gap year, 2 gap years, between the time when I had gotten my final grades from high school and when I applied to Cambridge. And then it made sense for me to enter my employment, because then they could see from my application that I had not been doing nothing for these years. I had actually been working. So I think that there could be like good reasons to enter your employment if it tells something about you as an applicant and if it relates to any other part of your application.
Yeah, I think also though a lot of universities, I get the impression, don't know for a fact, don't really look at this section a lot. So it's worth, say if you've done a gap year or you've taken multiple years out, it's worth mentioning that either in your personal statement or getting your teacher to reference it, just so that they know that like you've not just been, say, lying on a beach all the time and forgetting how to, say, do maths, and now you're applying for engineering. So like it's probably a good idea to mention it there as well.
This is not saying that you do not need to mention it in your in the employment section. You should still enter it there if this is the case. But as you say, I addressed that was one of the things that made my application maybe different from other applications, and I did not want it to be like something that, as you said, looked like I had not done anything with that time. So instead I tried to explain in my personal statement what I had done, how that related to what I wanted to do later, and like why that was a strength of mine rather than something, you know, that I needed to explain away. You shouldn't spend too much space on this in your personal statement, but it's good to address it a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds like good advice. So I'm just going to not add anything and say I haven't had any paid employment, or example face hasn't had any paid employment. And now we get to everyone's favorite part. 4,000 characters of unending fun. The personal statement. So I think there's a lot of good advice out there on the personal statement already, but just a few things I would say to keep in mind. Firstly, particularly for universities like Oxford and Cambridge, and very academic universities, like extracurriculars aren't particularly important to them. Like, you can talk about them for a little bit, but I wouldn't make it a big part of your personal statement unless they relate to the course you're doing. So, say I'm applying for PPE, and I say, like, I did competitive debating. That relates to the course, because it's about my ability to analyze arguments, and I'll probably, be doing that a lot during a PPE degree. But say I'm really great at rowing, I might mention it because it shows like I can manage time and that I'm committed, but it's very different to say applying to US universities and that you're applying for a specific course, and like chances are, particularly in the case of Oxford and Cambridge, where they're just choosing who they think would be best for a specific course, they're not going to pay it a lot of attention. So it should be mainly academic for those sorts of universities at least. The second thing that I would keep in mind is that for Oxford and Cambridge, although you obviously want to write a really good personal statement, it's often something whose importance is exaggerated, because the personal statement is just one part of what is used. You have your grades that you've given, and like predicted grades and things. You have your teacher reference, but for Oxford and Cambridge you also have admissions tests in the interviews. And I'd say that in a lot of cases, particularly for competitive courses, those other things are, say the admissions tests are much more important than the personal statement. For other universities, the personal statement is often sort of all that they have that isn't a grade or a teacher reference. So that's more important. But I think a mistake that you can make is sort of getting very nervous about the personal statement, particularly for Oxbridge. And it's important to realise that it's something to try to do well at, but it isn't like the be all and end all. Yeah, those are just like.
Yeah, I think that there are some things to think about when it comes to like applying to Oxford and applying to other universities. If you're applying to either way, it should be said that a personal statement is not like a personal statement. Like it's at least it's the difference between like your private like self and your academic self, and your personal statement is like addressing your academic self. So you want to write, if you're writing about your own experiences, you kind of want to weave them into some sort of academic perspective or how it relates to your course.
Yeah. So you should be sort of answering.
Show like aptitude for the course, and you want to show.
Lag.
Oh, really?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Another thing when it comes to like different universities. In Cambridge, this is something that they read before the interview, so it's one of the things that like weigh in when they decide whether they should call you to an interview or not. For other universities, it replaces the interview. So think about like where you're aiming and like what your weight, because of course it's a little bit of a gamble to like it's the only thing you can show other universities. So you might want to show that you are a well-rounded applicant. However, then you're gambling with space if you're applying to Oxford and Cambridge and not giving them as much of your like academic self, and maybe talking about things that you have read or things that you've experienced and related to some sort of academic content.
Yeah.
And you're very free to ask if you have any. This is a big one, so if you have specific questions on this, feel free to ask in the chat about it.
Yes. Also, something to point out, because Oxbridge has interviews, so two things, because they have interviews, like, it's something, for example, on the Oxford PPE website, I remember it saying, don't think too much about Oxford when you're writing your personal statement. Sort of write your personal statement for the other universities, so long as it's consistent with applying to Oxford, because we have a whole lot of other information that they don't. So, for example, for PPE, you don't need to explicitly say, I am applying for PPE. In fact, I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're not applying for PPE everywhere. Because other universities might look and be like, hey, is this person really interested in the course they're applying for here? And the second thing is that, like, having a mainly academic personal statement, on the other hand, is not going to hurt for an academic course anywhere. Like, no university is going to turn around and be like, hey, they talked about extracurriculars for 20% rather than like 50% of their personal statement. We can't take that. That's not going to happen. So don't worry about that. If you've done extracurriculars, I think it's nice to mention them for a sentence or two, or maybe 3 or 4, to just like show that you're a rounded human being, but it's not really necessary for Oxbridge, and it's not something to worry about. That's what I'd say. Yeah.
I was at a conference where for students who were applying like before I started at Cambridge, and one of the admissions officers at Cambridge, Emily Tomlinson, she's at Christ College here, she was there, and they got the question like, what would you like to see in a personal statement? And there was a man from an American university sitting next to her, and he got the question first, and he was like, oh, we would like to, know who you are, know your story, like why we should take you as a person. And Emily went after, and she was like, yeah, at Oxbridge, we don't care about this at all. We don't care about like who you are as a person. Like, we don't care if you were an only child and your divorced mother raised you and you went through hell. Like, we don't care about that. We care about whether you can succeed in this course or not. So show us that. Show us like your academic aptitude. Show us your passion for the course. Like, that is what we want to see when you're applying to Oxford, so when you're writing a personal statement. So I think it's important to understand that distinction and what part of your personality they're actually interested in a personal statement.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Obviously, I think you can have fun. You can, like, in like that situation, you can talk about like what you learned from, say, like being an orphan. If that relates to, like, say you're applying for social work, like, you can, and it makes it interesting because they're reading tons of personal statements. If you have something that's interesting about your personality or about your life, feel free to mention it, but then link it to something academic.
Yeah,
And
link it
even if you're really
academically
tenuous,
so it's not like a
that's
sub
okay.
story about yourself.
Yeah,
It should
exactly.
be always relating back to the course and how that experience that you had. I mean, doesn't matter if it was something from your like own life that's a huge event, or if it was like a museum visit, or like whatever it was, big or small, whatever you're mentioning from your life, relate it back to the course and how it made you interested in the course, or what it made you think, related to something academic.
Yes. Like basically, when they're reading the personal statement, they're thinking, why should we let you in for this course? So it's sort of just an opportunity for you to say, like, here's why I really want to study this course and I think I'd be good at it. And also remember, don't mention university names, like, specifically. If you're like, I really want to study at Bristol, then like every university apart from Bristol might get a bit annoyed by that, unless you've only applied for Bristol, in which case, like, feel free. Yeah. So any questions? Have we got any questions on the personal statement?
I don't think so at this point.
Okay.
Good news, everyone has written a perfect personal statement and we have nothing to worry about with these applicants at least.
Oh yeah, one other
That's
thing.
good news.
About personal statements, it's really good to have a sort of academic thread running through your personal statement. So if you can link each paragraph to the other one, then that can be really helpful. Just like, for example, I'm just trying to remember how mine looked. I was applying for PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics, and I started my personal statement talking about poverty and like some experience of being in the developing world, and I linked that to an essay I'd written about economic inequality and if we should care about that for any reasons other than poverty. Then I launched into something about an essay I'd written about moral philosophy and whether the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and from that talked about utilitarianism and about how utilitarianism affects how we think about economics and so on. So like if you can link things together to create like a clear academic like narrative, that's really helpful because then there's sort of like a story behind it.
No, I approach it very similarly. Like I started out with talking about, well, my work experience was teaching refugees in Sweden and like working with resettlement, and I then like bridged from that to academically then approaching social contract theory and like what citizenship means, and like led that experience like by very briefly mentioning it into the next paragraph where I mentioned then the academic content it actually related to, because that's the only thing that makes that experience interesting is if I can link it to something that I can approach academically. There's a question here. Is it essential to name books that you have read relating to the course in your personal statement? I think this depends. Sometimes you might want to mention a book or an author. Maybe you're talking about a specific concept, and if you're talking about a concept from a particular book, it might actually benefit like to say where you got that from. You don't need to write like the whole title. I think that, for example, I mentioned the surname of the author because you also don't have a lot of characters, so don't waste it on like writing the whole title of like articles or something like that. But you can mention something like quite briefly about it. What you don't want to do is mention the same book that everyone is mentioning in like each personal statement that they read. Like if you've just read Freakonomics, or if you read The Economist every week, don't mention it in your personal statement. Like just like for mentioning it, then you should pull something very specific out of it. So there might be some like pitfalls with mentioning specific things too, if it's the same specific things that everyone would mention on this topic.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and it's important to try to show that you've thought about what you've read. So it's one thing to be like, I read Freakonomics. It's another thing to be like, I read Freakonomics and thought that the argument about, I don't know, progressive taxation was interesting because of blah, but I disagreed because of blob. And so I then read this book. This book got me interested in this subject, and that's why I wrote an essay on blah, like, or whatever. That is much more impressive. although you can explore your subject in lots of different ways, not just reading, you can listen to podcasts, watch documentaries, just think, and those are all valid. It's worth pointing out that for Oxford and Cambridge, reading is a huge part of degrees, to the extent that we often talk about reading a degree. Like, we read a lot, so it's useful to have read some books. I wouldn't say it's essential, but I can't think of anyone here who didn't mention some book on their personal statement. So
I agree. Every successful personal statement I have read have mentioned some literature, mentioned books. Sometimes it's been the title of a journal, and they refer to the content in that in the article that they read and said something about that. Often it's a book, and if you choose a book, then make sure that it's actually like academic literature, to some extent, so that it's not like too popular, cultural, like on your subject. And yeah, if you have any specific, I don't know if you feel that we've answered your question now. Is it specific enough, or do you feel like you understand how we think about this? Do you have anything more to add, Peter, about books?
Two little things that I've just thought of. One, it's not a competition to list as many books as possible, and this is probably a bad idea. It's good if you can be like, I've read loads of stuff. But if you just like list a ton of books, that's boring. You don't have as much space to talk about what you thought about the stuff in them. And also, if you get an interview at Oxford or Cambridge, you now have a whole lot of books to try to remember stuff from in case they ask you about them. That's another thing. Like, if you say that you read a book and you're going to be interviewed, it's a really smart idea to actually have read that book, or at least to read it in time for the interview. There are so many stories about like interviewees at Oxbridge saying, like, what do you think of the conclusion about blah in this book? The interviewer saying, like, what do you think about the conclusion about blah in this book? And like the student just not knowing. And it's just like a really easy way to avoid making a bad impression, to just actually read the books you mention. And if you only mention like 2 or 3, but you've read them and thought about them a lot, that's fine.
And I can confirm this. I mentioned, I think, 2 or 3 books in my personal statement, and I got very specific questions on them in the interview. Luckily, I had read them, so that when they brought up a concept that was not even specifically like what I had mentioned in my personal statement, but when they brought up a concept from that book that I had allegedly read, then I could actually discuss that concept. But they want to make sure that you can deal with like the type of situation that a supervision would be like, and that you actually have like the ability to go through that course. So they would be thinking that if she actually read this book, we would want her to have something to say about it when she's doing this degree. It's as Peter said, it's a very wise thing to then have done that and have thought about it. And if you write that something is your argument, like based on what you've read in your personal statement, it's good if you could defend that argument at a later point too.
So my favorite example of what not to do comes from a Cambridge history applicant who started their personal statement, "History is a paradox." They came out of their interview, and my friend who was interviewing next said it was awful. When I asked them why, they asked me why I thought history was a paradox, and I couldn't answer. So like, if you say something to sound clever, which I wouldn't advise doing in the first place, just say what you think, then like have good reasons for saying that thing, and think about why that's the case. Some people even suggest going through your personal statement and turning every sentence into a question, and then trying to answer it, which can be quite a nice methodical method for just like going through and checking that you can defend everything in it. You don't have to do it that way, but that's something that some people do.
Okay, should we? Are there any more questions about the personal statement? Please write them in the chat, and otherwise, maybe let's proceed to the next section.
Okay, so I've just filled in like one of the worst ways you can start a personal statement. Please don't do this. from a young age, I have always been
Oh, yeah,
fascinated by.
don't do that.
Like, it is really one of the most common. They have statistics, and it's one of the most common ways that the personal statement is started, which is funny because it's also one of the worst ways to start a personal statement. I've seen what is physics. I don't really know. That's why I want to study it. But at least that's clever. At least that's new. This is very boring. Don't start your personal statement like that.
Ideally, you have an experience or something you have read, seen, heard, whatever, that actually explains why you are interested in studying your subject, and that's what's going in there. That makes sense to put in there.
Okay, yeah. So the next stage is about a reference. Here we've selected that we're applying independently, which is why we have to do this section like this. There's a UCAS guide to references, which you can read through, and it's probably useful. What you do if you're applying independently is to give details of your reference, contact whoever you're going to ask to write a reference first, and then give all these details and save it. If you're applying through your school, you'll have entered by this stage a buzzword that your school will give you, and then your teachers can add the reference, and you don't have to supply these details from memory. You certainly don't need to supply like an address and stuff, I don't think. So you have that.
I applied this way, and just make sure like to send an email, and like ideally as early as you can, because they might need some time to provide all this information and also to actually write the reference.
Yeah.
So for an application, like as soon as you can. Before I started writing a statement and like filling in the other information, I just emailed my reference as the first thing, because I thought if I'm struggling with this and I'm still focusing all my time on it, she's probably going to want some more time doing the reference.
Yeah. Also, if you want to have certain things mentioned in your reference, obviously like not sort of made up sentences about how great you are, but like things like say you had some problems when you were taking your GCSEs because you had extenuating circumstances or whatever, or your school has had to switch decided to switch A-level courses halfway through, and you want to like remind your teachers of that. That's fine, particularly if it's someone who's less sort of academically close to you, because you've been away from school for a while. Just saying like, hey, could you maybe mention these things, is potentially a useful thing. So
another thing is that you don't want too much of an overlap between your personal statement and what your reference is writing. I spoke to my reference. I told her roughly what I was writing about, and she also sent me what she was writing about me. I didn't see it at UCAS, but she sent me like, oh, I was thinking of bringing up those things. And then I saw that she had mentioned that I had attended a Model United Nations while I was in high school. And I didn't know that she was going to mention that, because, she was my teacher, but she could have mentioned like any part of my high school education. But she decided to bring that up, and then I decided to emphasize that a lot less in my personal statement, because otherwise just saying the same things twice, not using all the space you can to, make yourself, show your interest in aptitude for this course.
Yeah, that just reminded me of two other things about personal statements and certain universities. So Cambridge has something called the SAQ, the Supplementary Application Questionnaire, which gives you the opportunity to talk about why you want to apply for a specific course at Cambridge. It's like a little extra section, and it also used to give you the chance to give specific module grades if you did old A-levels or that sort of thing. That's useful.
You get 1,200 characters, so it's not 4,000 characters as the other personal statement, but it's like a small addition, which gives you absolutely no reason to mention Cambridge specifically in your regular personal statement, because you can do it in the SAQ.
Yeah, Oxford don't do that, at least at the moment. Also, as of a couple of years ago when I applied, I think this is still happening, Durham University let you write in their own system a separate personal statement just for them, and they'll bin whatever you wrote on UCAS. So if you want to apply for a different course somewhere else, like a related course but it's slightly different, and for just one university, and that university happens to be Durham, then that's useful to know. You don't have to write a separate personal statement for them, but you can if you want.
I applied to Durham as one of my other options, like not Cambridge, and I used like the very same personal statement as I used in UCAS, and got an offer from there. So I don't think it's an issue if you use the same one as you used in UCAS either. Don't feel the pressure to write two.
Yeah, it's just an opportunity. So like you could tailor it to the Durham course. So like here is a list of all the information you've supplied. There's loads of like missing stuff in my case, but obviously when this is your application, look through it really carefully. Maybe ask someone else to just double check you haven't missed anything or made any mistakes, because it's quite important. I've only added one choice. You can obviously add up to 5, as we said. And yeah, so this has a load of errors and incomplete stuff, but once you've done this without those errors, you can press save, you can come back here and go on to pay and send off your application. And then you just sit back, relax, register, register for any admissions tests you have to take, make sure that emails are coming through. Oxbridge often email, and Oxbridge emails often end up in spam folders. Also, a little plug, as well as Project Access having great resources, there's a website that I'm involved in called insideuni.org, which is completely free, and last year it launched in Cambridge. This year it's also launching in Oxford. The idea is to break down the knowledge gap around Oxbridge applications by crowdsourcing really good information from students about like their experiences, their interviews, and so on. So right now it's just got Cambridge examples, but it will soon have Oxford ones as well. Also like subject guides for specific subjects, and for Oxford we're planning on introducing admissions test guides as well. So keep an eye out on insideuni.org. Completely free, very cool. I'm very biased, but still very cool. Yeah.
And if you have the opportunity, like with your personal statement, to have someone who's done an Oxbridge application or UCAS application before, if you have an opportunity to have someone reading it, like do it and get feedback. You still have a few days until the deadline. Maybe a bunch of you have a Project Access mentor, and then of course that's a good person to have reading it. But I waited very long until back on my statement because I was afraid that it wasn't going to be good enough and it was going to be embarrassing to have someone else reading it. But actually getting some feedback gave me the chance to make significant improvements that I wouldn't have done otherwise, because I was just like staring at that personal statement myself for such a long time. So let someone else read it. And of course, you know, it's good if that someone else is someone who is like qualified to read, who like actually applied or like made a successful application to the type of university you want to go to. But if you have someone like that, don't hesitate to get some feedback. And then, of course, you decide what you do with that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to accept all the feedback, but it's good to have it. Just a thought I've just had. If you want to send a question but want to send it like anonymously, feel free to send it to the Project Access Facebook page. And if you do that quickly in the next few minutes, then we'll find out about it and we can answer that. As for personal statement feedback, if you decide that you want to send your personal statement to multiple people for feedback, I personally recommend sending it to one person at a time, because otherwise what can sometimes happen is you send it to 3 people and they each suggest something slightly different, and it's not actually the most efficient way to do it. So I think like incremental improvements one at a time are probably the best way to go. And yeah, with people who ideally know what they're doing. This isn't essential though. Like, universities are not going to be, you know, they want, it's good to have good grammar in your personal statement. If you misspell one word though, they're probably not going to reject you because of that. I think that's the way to think about it. So I'm just gonna basically let people know at Project Access that we might be getting some questions via the Facebook page.
Yes, so we are about to wrap up now, having gone for 59 minutes. So if you have any final questions that you want us to address, before we finish this webinar, either write them in the chat, as some of you have before, or write them now to the Project Access account so we can address them. And I think Sophia is listening in as well. At least she was before, so I think she's checking the Facebook account.
Okay, so we haven't received any yet. If you have any last-minute questions, now is the time. Although obviously you can email like Project Access if you have any other questions, any other things pop into your mind later. I know that this can seem a bit daunting, but so long as you just sort of go through it methodically, it's really okay. It's fine. We all survived it, and best of luck.
And if there's anything you heard today that you thought like, oh no, I did not add that to my application yet or to my personal statement, don't be too stressed. You still have about another week to make it and fix whatever you feel that you want to take another look at. So do that, and thank you so much for listening to our advice. As Peter said, if they're mentors, and otherwise, best of luck with your applications. Hope to see you here next fall.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for paying attention and coming onto this webinar, because honestly that puts you into like a very small minority of people applying to universities, and probably means statistically you're going to send off really great applications and hopefully get lots of really great offers. So that's good news. So I think that's pretty much everything. Let's just wait like 1 more minute to see if anything comes through before we wrap this up. Okay, cool. And if you send on the YouTube chat the address insideuni.org as well, that would be cool, in case it's sort of small on here. Again, in case you missed at the beginning, I don't want to click on YouTube on this screen because I'm doing a screen capture, and then we'll probably get an infinite feedback loop, possibly a crash. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think I don't see any more questions coming in, so I think we can wrap this up.
Okay, great. Hopefully that was helpful. Well done. Good luck. Feel free to send emails to like PA if you have any further questions, or just like comment on this video, because you'll be able to watch it back again. Cool. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.